Hey there. Welcome to the 21 Clear podcast. I'm your host, Adam Hatcher, the founder of 21 Clear, a family business consulting firm. And our goal here is to help you chaos-proof your family business with each episode that we release. Today, we're going to follow up on episode number 11. In 11, I shared an excerpt of a virtual panel I got to be part of. Kennesaw State University, which is in North Atlanta here in Georgia, has a family enterprise center. And they invited me and two other next gens who had been in their family companies to talk about what it's like to leave your family company. In the last podcast, I shared an excerpt of that, and the three of us focused on what it feels like, because inevitably, you and all your family members with whom you work and own the company with will both no longer work there and one day no longer own the business as well. So for those who had not thought about the idea, been scared to talk about it, were somewhere in thinking about it, or just wanted to be proactive, we talked about, well, what's the experience like from three people who had done it? Well, in this episode, I want to get a little bit more into planning. Andrea Carpenter leads the Transition Specialist Group. And Andrea had me back for a second time to talk about inter-family business issues. And this time we actually leaned again into how to leave your company well. But instead of focusing on the feeling of leaving and the experience, Andrea and I got practical. We talk in this episode, or at least in this excerpt that I'm going to share with you, about the importance of keeping a pulse on how it's going. Understanding where you are in your journey in the family company that will begin, it will have a middle, and at some point it will end. And we give some practical questions to ask, particularly if you are a next gen working in the business. And then Andrea asked me a good question about how, if you don't have these kind of conversations, you can get them going. So I'm excited to share this excerpt with you, and I hope it helps you as you think about your inter-family business. I was in my family's company for 13 years. I started as the general counsel, which is a mistake. If you ever start in your family's company, don't let them put the word general in your title, because then you will just end up doing everything else. So I was general counsel and then became corporate strategy lead with a board member, then stepped into head of corporate strategy, and then added to that vice president of human resources. So for my last 7 or so years there, it was all three of those roles combined. But what was interesting, and this was something I shared with the leadership when my father and I announced my exit, is that he and I always kept a dialogue going about what the future of my career was. He would openly say to me in my annual reviews, I want you to feel free to think outside this company. And that came from his personal experience. My dad graduated from the University of Georgia on Friday. He went to work in the family company on Monday. And as he said it to me, the only person who ever promoted me was my father. And sometimes I had to buy my promotion. So he wanted me, and I have two siblings, he always wanted us to know that we had value outside the company. That's that hiring part, putting people through a process. But then we kept that alive throughout. And we never shared that with anyone because it probably could panic people. Like, what? They're always talking about him leaving. But that, Andrea, was one thing that was helpful. The second thing that was helpful in helping me realize a new step in my career was that we had, what's it been now? It's probably been 20 years of family meetings. So if you've never had one of these, I was working with a family recently, and our sit down together was the first time all the people who worked in and owned the company who were family members had ever sat in a room and talked about the fact that they worked in and owned the company together. And the company had been around for over 25 years. And that's normal for a lot of us. It's an odd, we figure we see you on Sunday after church. I see you in meetings. Like, what's a family meeting? But these are just quickly when you sit down the family members who work in the business, who own the business, and sometimes the family members around that group too, the ones impacted. Sit down and work on the unique dynamic in how you work in and own the business. So I've got about 20 years of those, not just with what I do with other families, myself. That, I didn't know when we started those meetings that meeting was where seeing a new step in my career was gonna start. But I am so, if you haven't had one of those, I deeply encourage them. It's what I facilitate for families, because I can't imagine that conversation having happened in an executive meeting, in my annual review with my dad, like in a one-off, my brother and I play golf together, like just walking up the 10th fairway with my brother. That's not the place for that, nor did it create the space for it. So the root for me, one, was that the dialogue was always open to think outside of it. But then there were family meetings.
Yeah. And I think meetings and open communication and place for everyone to talk is important. There's likely people listening, maybe they don't have that structure currently. There's no, like, I want to talk about the future, whether that's staying, whether that's going, just there are no meetings like to bring things up. So what advice would you give to someone who maybe is in a position where they're trying to open communication more as a family? Where would you tell them to start?
All right, where do they work in the business? Do they have the controlling shares? Do they control the business from an ownership perspective, or are they the next gen?
They're the next gen. Yeah, next gen who might be listening here. They want to initiate conversations about the future, but that current controlling generation, it is maybe not. It sounds like your dad had a lot of awareness. Being the second generation already, he felt some of those things, but many successors who are the second generation, they're coming in from that founding generation, which sometimes is a very different dynamic of, well, I built this thing. I worked really hard. I don't want my kids to be entitled. So how do you start if you're thinking like, hey, this might actually be a family company, whether I'm going to stay or whether I'm going to go, but we should talk about it. What advice would you give?
All right. So it's interesting, like some of the things you talked about for those of us that have a controlling interest in the company. I'm going to touch that even though you told me not to. Okay. And then we'll go back. When I meet families that are needing help, that want to start having conversations and want someone there, as someone said recently, they act better when you're here. And we use facilitators as well. Have used, do use. It helps. It really helps when a family member doesn't have to play that role.
Yep.
When it's the person who has control of the business through ownership, the reason they typically want to talk is because either there was a disaster or a near disaster in the previous generation, going from Gen 1 to Gen 2. Like they experienced it and they don't ever want to go through that again. Or they see people around them, family companies they know around them, that are starting to go through casualty situations or chaos, and they don't want to do that. Sometimes things seem to be going great, and it's actually the next generation that picks up on it. I remember talking with one family, and there was a lot of anxiety. It was a high-debt business, a lot of anxiety in the next generation about what would happen if there was an emergency situation with the two siblings that owned the company. Mm-hmm. And so you talk to the next gens, they said, we don't know if we'd all of a sudden all be in debt or what's going to happen. And then you talk to the siblings that own the company, they said, what? We told them 8 years ago. We were at lunch and we told them what happens. What more do they need? It's more than we had. So sometimes the need for the meeting comes, the next generation has a sense, this could be so much better, or there's something I really need help talking about. Because there's an anxiety to it. So if that is you, this is what I have found helpful. When I sat with a family last week and we had their first meeting. And when we start, Andrea, we say, okay, when you work with your family, you typically want two things. You want to build a great company with a strong family, right? Or a healthy family. A great company with a healthy family. Now, a great company doesn't have to be huge. Okay, we're not all going to be Marriott. We're not all going to be the Waltons. You don't have to be. You can have 1, 2, 3 locations. You can be regional, whatever it is. Whatever financial and community impact you want to have with the business, that's your greatness. But you want to have a great company with a healthy family. Now, you might want to be best friends and see each other every week, or you may just want to enjoy getting together when you do. Whatever your answer is, I love to ask families that up front. Because when they say, yeah, of course, like, who says no to that? Who says, wow, no, some people actually. But when you start there, like, so if you're a next gen, hey, I work here because I've dreamed about a great company and a really strong family around it. And we never talk about that. Like, that's not, you never sit in an executive meeting. I did that for a decade. Never sat in an exec meeting and the vice president of operations looked at me and my father and said, how are y'all working together? How are you working with your sister who doesn't work in the business? What do you communicate? Never one time asked that. So I would like a great company, a healthy family, and I'd like to talk about it. Like, that's an easy way to step into it.
Yeah. I like that framing. And it's also, there's nothing threatening. Well, okay, you know your parents, but there's really nothing threatening about, I can see an opportunity for us to talk about how to make our family stronger. That's oftentimes a really big pull. You're talking about, we have this concept of there's your family community and your family business community. Sometimes people are in both. Sometimes people are only in one, but you're talking about what is the integration of these? How do we as a family want that to look at, and what does that look like? I'm curious, Adam, in your work, what percentage of the time are next gens reaching out to you as like the initial point? Because at least for us, I see 50 to 60% of the time it's actually the next generation, because you're the one with the excitement for the future and the energy and the passion. A lot of times, like, I think we can make this better. Let's talk about what this would look like. And so you can empower yourself and you can get help to find the words if you don't know exactly what the words are, but you can start these conversations about what it looks like, because it is going to be super impactful on you and the next generation, whether you're actively in the business or not. So
yeah, I'm similar.
Yeah.
Half the time I connect with a family, it's the generation that's got ownership control, which is not always, but typically the older generation. That situation flips sometimes.
Yep.
And then half the time it's the generation without control. But then my goal, when you do, and y'all are the same way, when you work with a family, different than a CPA or a wealth manager for you who's looking out for your best interest.
Yep.
The goal then is to bring everybody together, and you work on that unique dynamic of how they work in and own the company together.
Yeah.
For the next gens, so if you think, do I need to have a family meeting now? So I took some time, and you and I talked about last time, I reflected on everything I'd ever learned about family companies and wrote a book called The Chaos-Proof Family Business and dedicated a few chapters to leaving. And there were a few questions that I wrote down, and I'll share a few of them because they may be helpful to the listeners. So if you are not in control of the business, I think, or if you are, it doesn't matter. You could be in control, not in control. You could supervise a family member. Those are 3 distinct positions. I think at all times, you need to have a pulse on how you're doing in the company. Because remember, you're on a journey that's going to end at some point. And we were joking earlier, like, something's going to force you out if you don't do it one day. But if you're a next gen, and I sat with, thinking back to a family from 3 months ago, I remember asking the next generation, and you just ask everyone equally, take a minute and think, is there a future at this company that excites you? Like, can you see responsibilities that you can earn, a type of work you can enjoy, the compensation that you need or want for the life you want? Like, take a breath. You're probably working really hard right now. Family companies, we work hard. But is there something 5 years down the road you want? And can this organization provide that to you? Mm-hmm. I have seen families that sat and said, family members who thought, oh, this is the kind of thing I want to do. And Andrea, the company could not reasonably have grown into that within the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. In tough situations, you and I probably get a lot of phone calls when things are hard. Mm-hmm. Can you do your job wholeheartedly? Can you bring your talents, your opinions, your spirit, your personality? Can you be you in the job you have? Mm-hmm. Which a lot of times when I start working with families, that's something we have to do. We have to, because a lot of us drift into jobs over time. Let's define the role the company needs. And then can you do that wholeheartedly? Mm-hmm. Because what's interesting in family companies, so I did about 7 years as the head of HR in our family's company and learned that employee engagement is, a mentor taught me, it can be really simple. Mm-hmm. Like 3 things, okay? Imagine it like if you're watching on YouTube, I've got my fingers in a triangle. 3 things. Do you enjoy your work environment? Are you rewarded and recognized fairly? And do you have a chance to develop? Can you see something you want to develop to, and are you being supported? All right, so let me go back. Do you like your work environment? And that's typically, do you respect your boss and feel respected? And do you like the way everyone behaves at the company? All right. Just because you're working at your family's company does not mean that is true. Just because you report to your uncle does not mean you all work well together. Or you will automatically work well together without being intentional in how you work together. Mm-hmm. So to go to the second one, rewarded and recognized fairly. Just because you work in your family's company doesn't mean you're receiving market compensation. Or you might be overcompensated, which can have its own baggage that comes with it as well. Yep. Just because you work with your family doesn't mean you all recognize each other and compliment and affirm each other for what you do well. And then to that last side, development, just because you work with your family doesn't mean you can clearly see what's next. Mm. And doesn't mean that you're being supported in getting there. Yeah. Working in a family company does not inevitably provide reward and recognition, development, and the work environment that will make a family member want to stay. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about can you do your job wholeheartedly, you would think when you go to work with your family, oh, it's just going to be automatic. No, like you have to give it just the same thought, if not more, than another employee in your company.
Yeah, I love that example. And we have a tool called the Objectives Matrix, which we start every single person in the family off with. Like, what do you really want to achieve? And you think about your family first. For you, if you have a spouse or a partner, if you have any children, what are the things that you want to accomplish in life? I love the triangle. But sometimes maybe growth is important to you, but maybe you're at a stage of life you're like, actually, that's not something that is super important to me or that I'm optimizing for right now. And so to be able to put words behind, yeah, that's a deal breaker. I need to be compensated fairly. And that's a deal breaker for me because if I am not compensated fairly, then I'm going to walk away. Or if my siblings are working in the business and they're being compensated the same as me, but they're not working, they're not actually working. They're just getting compensation because they're part of the family and that's how it was set up. That could feel like a deal breaker to you. And any of those things are valid, right? Your impression of what is a deal breaker or what is not doesn't really matter to other people. You just need to have conviction around what are the things that are most important to you? Because then as you start to explore, should I stay? Should I go? How fast is it going to go? What is the timeline going to look like? All of these other pieces that can start to come out as you make decisions on all of that, you can actually make them grounded in, okay, I actually know what are the most important things to me. And so I just wanted to bring in, I think there's some inner work to do as well before you're just in a family meeting. Like I'm assuming you put a lot of thought in before you went into the family meeting and said, I think I'm ready to go kind of do this thing. Like you had really thought about what that would look like and what the case would be so that you could come with a compelling case to start a conversation. So maybe can you take us a little bit to that moment around how you told and what that conversation looked like?
Yeah. What I liked, even hearing the way you asked that, is because we were in family meetings, again, these meetings focused on how we work in and own the company together, it wasn't a surprise topic. And it actually evolved over time. It wasn't an acute moment. And so this is something that I like to do with family, is our family consultant did it with us. Before we got to the meeting, he emailed out a prompt and he had us imagine headlines. And he said, it was either 3 or 5, think 3 to 5 years out. What headlines would you want the local newspaper to be writing about you, about the family, about the company? And you were supposed to do it independently. So my siblings, my parents, and you're not supposed to look or send them to anybody ahead of time. And of course, he would talk with us before the meeting.
Yeah.
And I didn't write "My time is now." Like, that was not one of my headlines. But in doing that, it gave me space to reflect. So I need to tell you a little bit about me. I believe if you work in your family's company, that you need to always be working yourself out of a job. Just like any other company. If your family's company depends on you, that company is as vulnerable as any non-family company. That is why succession and development exists. And so if I'm going to teach that in the company, I had to live it. And so over time, Andrea, we were growing the company. I was always working to replace myself with people that were better than me. So that's going on when I have to answer this question. And in answering it, I realized that it was time for me to start letting go of my roles. And I wrote that, and as we sat in the meeting, and so that was it. I just said, my time in these roles has ended because there are people ready to take them. And the company will be better for that. Now, I didn't think the headline all the way through from there. But what was nice about it and was not threatening and didn't make that scary to say is, one, there were no executives. That wasn't a team meeting. That was just us, the family members, the ownership, like this is my siblings and my parents. And then everyone else did the same thing. So I got to hear what was important to each of them and what they hoped for and imagined. Yeah. So if it sounded like it was some bomb shock in a meeting, it wasn't. It was actually very gradual, and it started with everybody thinking 3 to 5 years out.
I love that. And I think just the space, there's so many different activities and questions and conversation structures. Like, the world is so infinite in how these things might come up. So you can figure out what works best for you, what works best for your family. But I love that it came up in a natural way, that it came up around ambitions, and it was rooted in what was important to you, that you were going to be able to do that. And that was already a value that they knew you had.
And that is just an excerpt of a much longer conversation that Andrea and I have. I'm going to link to the transition specialists in the show notes. You'll be able to get to the full version of the podcast, and I am excited for you to hear the whole conversation. I hope this was helpful to you. Every month when we put out this podcast, we want to give you somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes just to think about how your family works in and owns the company together. 21 Clear, when you look at us from an entire content perspective, each month we publish a podcast, a newsletter, and somewhere between 12 and 15 posts on LinkedIn. If you take all those together, it's about an hour of your time each month. And all that content is meant to help you think about the dynamics of how you work in and own your company together. There's a lot of stuff about how to develop yourself personally. There's a lot about how to set smart business strategy, but that inner family business is something that's hard to focus on. So our hope is that each of the things that we publish helps you do that. In the show notes, you can subscribe to the newsletter and follow me on LinkedIn. Here's some of the stuff you'll see too. I had a former CEO of his family's company jump into the comments on a post that I wrote, and it actually relates to leaving your family company. So I want to close us with this, and I hope this is an endorsement to you for spending more time just thinking about and reading and listening to things about how you work with your family. All right, so in response to a post I had put up on LinkedIn about leaving, Pete stepped in and wrote this. He says, 8 years ago, I hired a succession coach to begin transitioning the business to my son. 30 days in, the coach met with me and said, you need to leave. Your voice is simply too big, even though you don't carry the title. So I was there on Friday and gone on Monday. And the next year of my life was at best difficult. And then Pete goes on to share practical advice that he has learned in reflecting on his exit that he would give to anyone else, particularly if you are the controlling generation, either by title or by ownership or both in your family company. That, y'all, is the value of engaging this deeper inner family business work and thought. So I hope this podcast has helped you. I hope LinkedIn and the newsletter help you. And every part of this is about helping you better chaos-proof your family company. I appreciate you joining us. I look forward to being with you in the next episode. And as my grandfather would have said, thank you so very, very much for listening.